Welcome back to Motive and Malice. Today, we are cracking open a case that has been a complete enigma in Germany for 40 years. It's fascinated and, let's be honest, frustrated armchair detectives for decades, the YOGTZE case. It's a story with all the ingredients of a classic conspiracy thriller, but here's the kicker. Police have just announced that this riddle is finally solved. So, let's break down what really happened.
Just picture this for a second. A cryptic, nonsensical note. A man's naked body found in the passenger seat of his own crashed car. And a dying declaration. A whisper about 4 unknown men. For 40 years, these were the puzzle pieces that pointed straight to a complex murder plot. But the truth? Well, it turned out to be stranger and a whole lot more tragic than any of us could have imagined.
All right, so let's set the scene. We're going back to West Germany, 1984. Our story revolves around a man named Günther Stoll, a 34-year-old food engineer who was out of work. And by all accounts, Stoll's mental health was in a really bad place. He was consumed by this deep paranoia, absolutely convinced that this mysterious group, he only ever called them they, was out to get him. It got so bad he was even telling his wife to pretend she didn't know him if they saw each other in public.
On the night of October 25th, something just snapped. He's sitting there with his wife, and all of a sudden, he jumps to his feet and shouts this German phrase you see here, "Jetzt geht mir ein Licht auf," which basically means, "Now I've got it," or "the light just went on for me." He grabs a piece of paper, scribbles down the letters YOGTZE, and then, just as quickly, scratches them out with these really aggressive strokes. Without saying another word, he just walked out the door. It would be the last time anyone saw him alive.
So what on earth happened between that moment and his death? Stoll's final hours are this bizarre, chaotic journey that only made the mystery deeper for investigators. It became this timeline of pure chaos.
I mean, his movements were just all over the place. At 11 p.m., he writes the note and just bolts from his house. 10 minutes later, he's at his local pub. He orders a beer, but then just collapses before he can even take a sip. 2 hours after that, it's 1 a.m., and he shows up out of the blue at the home of an old acquaintance, rambling about some horrible incident that was going to happen that night. And then finally, at 3 a.m., the final, fatal discovery on the A45 motorway.
Police immediately thought this was foul play. And really, who could blame them? The truck drivers who found the wreck discovered Stoll naked and barely alive. And get this, not in the driver's seat, but in the passenger's seat. Before he died, he managed to tell them about 4 men who were with him but were, in his words, not friends. The drivers even said they saw a man in a white jacket walking away from the scene. But the original autopsy was the clincher. It concluded his injuries came from being run over by a totally different car, somewhere else. Everything screamed staged homicide.
So at the center of this whole apparent murder plot was that note. But here's an absolutely critical piece of the puzzle that shaped this legend for decades. The original note was never recovered. Stoll's wife, not thinking it was important, she just threw it away that night. The entire YOGTZE mystery is based purely on her memory months after it all happened.
And boy, oh boy, did that one memory launch 40 years of wild speculation. The theories were all over the map. Some people were convinced it was a Romanian radio call sign, YO6TZE, which suggested some kind of Cold War espionage. Others thought, hey, he was a food engineer. Maybe it was a code. YOG for yogurt and TZE for an additive, pointing to some industrial secret. People even theorized it was an anagram for Zygote, or maybe a phonetic spelling of the German phrase YOGTZE, which means hunt them. Each theory just built this more and more compelling story of conspiracy.
For decades, the case just went cold. The clues led absolutely nowhere, and the legends just got bigger and bigger. It really seemed destined to be one of Germany's great unsolved mysteries. But then, investigators in 2025 decided it was time to apply modern science to this very old evidence. The Hagen police reopened the entire file, bringing 21st century forensic tools to a 20th century puzzle. We're talking advanced DNA analysis, digital crash reconstruction. They re-examined every single piece of that original investigation. And what they found? It changed everything. And this right here is where the whole case just flips on its head.
Back in 1984, investigators were certain his injuries came from being run over by another car, but the 2025 forensic analysis proved his injuries were perfectly consistent with a single, high-speed crash in his own car, especially since he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. In '84, they were hunting for those 4 men, but modern DNA testing found 0 genetic material, no fingerprints, no hair, no skin cells from anybody but Stoll in that car. The entire homicide theory, built on what we now know was pretty outdated forensics, just completely fell apart.
So what about him being in the passenger seat? How did that happen? Well, the answer wasn't some elaborate staging. It was just physics, biomechanics. The new analysis created a digital reconstruction of the crash, and it showed that the sheer force of his VW Golf hitting the ditch catapulted the unbelted Stoll from the driver's side clear across the car upon impact. It was never a setup. It was science.
With this new, definitive scientific evidence, the Hagen Public Prosecutor's Office formally closed the YOGTZE case. The 40-year-old murder mystery was officially reclassified as a tragic single-car accident.
So the final verdict really rested on these key points. No one else's DNA was in the car. Period. Stoll wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and his catastrophic injuries matched the crash dynamics perfectly. The 4 men he mentioned were, tragically, most likely hallucinations, a product of the severe paranoia that drove all his actions that night. And that means the YOGTZE note, it wasn't a clue to a conspiracy, it was a symptom of his profound psychological distress.
And that just reframes this entire story, doesn't it? Günther Stoll wasn't the victim of shadowy assassins or corporate spies. He was a man fighting a terrible battle inside his own mind, a battle that tragically ended on a dark stretch of the Autobahn. The mystery wasn't about malice from other people, but about his own mental anguish.
This leaves us with one last really fascinating question. For 40 years, the world was captivated by a story of murder and conspiracy. The truth is quieter, sadder, and honestly, far more common. It really makes you wonder about our relationship with true crime stories, and why we are sometimes so much more drawn to the intricate myth than the simple, tragic reality. So what do you think about the conclusion to the YOGTZE case? Does the science satisfy the mystery for you, or does some part of that old legend still feel a little more compelling? Let us know what you're thinking down in the comments. And for more investigations that separate fact from fiction, make sure you subscribe to Motive and Malice. Thanks for joining us.